Hi, breathers. Welcome to Breathe or Die. I'm Danny May with Breath Guidance, and this is Breathing Under Pressure with my guest today, Marc Pezzella, who is a retired SWAT commander. In this episode, we talk about breathing under pressure when it's life or death, and you're in the line of fire, and that might be closed combat quarters, it might be shooting, it might be going into a high-stress hostage situation, or it could be something like scuba diving. Stay tuned and post any questions that you have in the comments below. Welcome to Breathe or Die. This is officially my second podcast episode, and I'm really excited you're here. So my guest today is Marc Pezzella, who is a former SWAT commander, among many other accolades. So Marc, will you just introduce yourself and let people know who you are and why they should listen to you?
Happy to. I don't know if they want to listen to me yet, but we'll see about that. First of all, thanks for having me. I was a former SWAT commander, and I was on a team for 21 years.
Awesome.
Got to grow within the team from team trainer to a sniper team leader, et cetera, et cetera. And then shortly after 9/11, I actually got picked up by the U.S. Department of State. I was a military contractor for a little bit. So, yeah, I had a fun career.
Nice. So I think people listening, they know me for teaching breathing techniques, and I assume that there is going to be some variety of interest in having a SWAT commander, somebody who's worked in really high adrenaline situations. So the first thing I'm really curious to know, and I think that my listeners would be really curious to know, is when you are in literal life and death situations where you're going into scenarios that you know there is a high probability for harm, and not just of you, but the people around you, what is something that you do with your breath when you go into those situations? Are you aware of your breath in the first place? Were you all trained on that? Was that something you just maybe picked up naturally? Can you speak a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Those are great questions, and I think that's what's so intriguing about it is that when you're in any high stress situation, and obviously kicking indoors or a sniper, things can get pretty critical. Breathing is paramount. And yes, to some of your questions, and no to some of your questions, meaning each scenario is different. Depending on what your particular job description is, what you're doing at the moment, your breathing techniques are going to change a little bit. But first and foremost, you have mission objectives. Mm-hmm. And that goes for just about everybody. If your job is to have high bursts of energy, then you're going to need to be taking in oxygen to sustain your muscles and the brain, etc. If you need to be calm, like long-range shots, then you need to calm your body, and you don't want that high level of respiratory rate and cortisol, releasing in your body. So it is a matter of trying to adapt your breathing technique to give your body what it needs to perform for your mission, and it's very different. I didn't tell you, but defensive tactics instructor, so I did some mixed martial arts, and I'm a diver. I'm a pretty active person, have probably too many hobbies, but they all require good breathing techniques, and they're somewhat different. I'm going to call for combat. I'm going to call it simple breathing techniques. I know you have much more experience with breathing techniques than I do. So I think you're going to find these I'm going to call it dumbed down. In the military, they call it the KISS system.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's keep it simple, stupid.
Huh.
So we try to keep it very simple. When critical incidents are happening, there's a lot going on. And you need to be able to digest all of the information that's coming in and then spit out a good skill set, and consequences are going to be a result of you being able to digest everything that's happening and then make good decisions. So decision making is extremely important.
So that's something that I find really fascinating, because I handle a lot of patients or clients who have anxiety disorder or panic disorder and stuff like that. And most of them are dealing with situations that aren't life or death. So I can only imagine when you're going into a scenario that is just insane adrenaline, that the brain can really only do the basic functions, right? Because survival is paramount. And I can't imagine, because I haven't been in a situation that I imagine that you have been in like that, where the body and the brain both go on, okay, what is the most foundational basic thing that I have to keep awareness on so that I can respond and react? When you were going through training and also going through your career of experience, was the breath something that the department or the sheriff's office who you worked for, did they come in and say, okay, we're really going to focus on breathing, the breath and breathing techniques, or was it something you kind of found on your own?
I would say a little bit of both, but mostly on my own. I think that it's an athlete. An athlete's going to do and research and learn as much as he can to perform the best he can.
Because I do hear that a lot of departments don't give y'all the type of training that maybe really will keep you alive as optimally as you could.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. When you look at any special forces, whether it's military or a SWAT team or any highly trained unit, it's expensive. It takes time.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily understood by everyone at your agency or the department or the government because it is a unique area. So, yes, the training.
Elaborate on that. When you say because some people, if they're listening, they might not be able to see your facial expression.
Yeah. So really what it comes down to is if you think about, I guess I'll use a SWAT commander or a SWAT team member. Who's going to know how to operate as a SWAT team member? And the answer comes down to the people that are trained to do so.
Yeah.
And that takes a long time. So, for example, we have team members that get on the team. There's a 1 or 2 year period where you're just the water boy.
Yeah.
And you're learning, you're absorbing, you're just being around it. And we're trying to train you and teach you. See the skill sets that are required for those kinds of things. People think, oh, it's ninja stuff. Well, we can teach most people how to handle firearms. Okay. We can teach most people the details of explosive breaching. What's difficult is what you had mentioned, is taking that chaos, that chaotic moment, and trying to be able to perform quickly with all that chaos happening.
Because so many people shut down and they freeze. So a lot of times you hear of the fight response, but there's the freeze where they just, the lights go out and nobody's home. So do you see that a lot? Or is that something like, how do you know when the water boy guy who's just been accepted onto the SWAT team, how does he prove or she prove themselves to be like, yeah, I'm ready. I can perform under this level of pressure?
When they can breathe under that kind of stress, oxygenate their brain, and give their body the maximum performance, which breathing is part of that, when those most critical moments are happening. So you kind of have to, you don't just throw somebody in the middle of a hostage rescue scenario, or the military doesn't just throw a Navy SEAL in the middle. It's a lot of time and training. Yeah. And through that time and training, you can see who is learning, who is developing, who's taking it on, who's being able to be a good team member for the rest of the team, make good decisions. But that takes time, and some people never get it. A lot of people think that, a Green Beret or some of these incredible heroes that we have are big and tough guys, and they are tough, and some of them are big. But believe it or not, it's more of a mental state. It's more of they just don't quit. It's in your mind and mind control and breathing, and that's what you have to have. We can teach you all the other stuff. Most guys can be taught how to do skill sets, but being able to make a decision underneath critical moments, that some people will never get that. And I know it sounds corny, but we'll watch people breathe. And I've been up to guys at the door before they get ready to go in, they're holding their breath. Yep. And we look at them and say, hey man, breathe. Yeah. Let's just start with breathing. Now there's more detail about obviously what kind of breath and how you want to breathe under combat and for shooting techniques. But that's a great question because sometimes you don't know. And we have had people be in critical moments that looked good, looked like they were performing well, and have come out of it and said, this isn't for me. Maybe the first time they were really put into what we call a two-way range where somebody's shooting back at you and you're shooting the other way. And sometimes it's just it's a difficult thing. It's not always the easiest thing for people. Some of us enjoy it. Some of us look for it. They want to do their job the best they can, like an athlete.
So I'm curious because Fitz and I were just talking about breath holding last week and how when we hold our breath, it's actually a protection response. So it's us trying to not feel, and we can't focus on the breath and survival at the same time. So I'm curious, Who were you? Because I imagine going through training and having this type of career changes you. You become a different person, right?
Yes,
So,
to
like,
some degree it has to, I think.
who were you before? And were you in talking to that grit, were you someone who always had it in you, knowing like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be able to breeze through this training, through this career, I'm gonna be able to become the commander, right? Or was it something that you cut your teeth through and you made it to the other side? And I'm sure it's
Mm.
probably a little bit of both, but was there something more that you could speak to in the sense of who were you before you joined SWAT, and how did you become who you ended up becoming?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not, I hate to sound like I know it all. I don't know it all, but I do like to share my experiences. And that part of it, I have a very personal side to, because like SWAT commander, it's a funny story. I never really wanted to be the SWAT commander. I didn't want to be the guy in the
Do people
command
like the
post.
commander, or are they like afraid of him? Like, what is
Both.
the okay?
Some liked me, some hated me. It's a difficult position. Any leadership position is challenging.
Kind of like being a parent,
That's
huh?
exactly right. Yeah, I've got 2 girls, so I can speak about that too. That's probably more challenging than being a SWAT commander. But yeah, you're going to be second guessed in any role like that. But you have to put others before yourself in that role. So I'll come back to what you were talking about. But the whole thing is to really truly put the mission and others before you. So that's kind of how I became SWAT commander. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I liked being a door kicker. I liked being with my guys. Love being a team leader, going through with them and helping, complete the mission. So as a SWAT commander, it was actually a unique challenge for me. I probably did more breathing technique as a SWAT commander than I did as actually, operating.
Because there's more weight on your shoulders,
There
kind of
was for
thing.
me.
Okay.
I put a lot of weight on myself. It caused me to study more and educate myself more. If I'm going to be giving orders, if I'm going to be asking men and people to do things, I better be right.
So I'm curious
and you're never always
because,
right.
well, you can't be, right?
It's difficult. So it's people's lives and their families. It was prior to anything I ever thought of for myself. And, it's important. And so going through the door, you make a decision. I live or die with my men.
Yeah.
I'm going with them.
So that makes me wonder, because I actually have a friend who is a psychologist and going through counseling a lot of first responders like firefighters and stuff like that. And some of them don't come home.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the families, and we were talking about wives and partners and spouses of military and first responders, how do you, and this might be too personal, so, let me know, but how do you leave your home, your family, your wife, your kids, and say, hey, I'm going to put myself in the line of fire, and I'm going to put these other people in front of my own life who aren't my family and who I don't know, and my team members, and you know what I mean? So how do you get into that mindset, and how do you convince your family to let you walk out the door every morning?
I think that's different for everybody. I think people's relationships, how they understand the commitment and the job, how much you talk about it, that's a big part of it.
Meaning?
Well, like how much you explain to your spouse or, your partners, your families, how much, if they're left in the dark, that generally doesn't bode well.
Okay.
People, naturally, we don't like to be left in the dark. So that's challenging. So communication is huge. Education is huge. Yeah. On both parts. And then I do remember that one of the first times I was doing an entry after my first child. And I hadn't thought about it, believe it or not, a lot. But it was a good one. And I thought, oh shit. If I go now, I have a child at home. And I remember it's called a debrief. It's something you do afterwards. And after the debrief was done, I went aside by myself and I said, okay, I need to have a talk with myself.
Yeah.
Because before then, it was just, like you said, I just kind of threw myself at whatever needed, because that was my job. That's your job. I love the fact, I love to call people heroes, because they are. Military guys, anybody that's willing to risk their lives for others. But I think that when you talk to those people, I don't think they view themselves as a hero. They're doing their job. And I loved my job. So I enjoyed doing it. A little bit selfish, I guess, but I did have to speak with my family. And then after time, like you said, getting out, it does change you a little bit. There's some things that you see and understand that most people don't get to do. And I feel like it was a blessing. I was fortunate to be honored to work with men that are willing to do those things in the name of justice and serving for others. it's just an honor. So I always wanted to be, you want to be the best you can be for each other.
Yeah.
And, going back to the breathing and how to get somebody prepared for these things, there are people that are not cut out for certain positions. And then there are people that work really hard at it, and with time and attrition and hard work. And then there's people that are natural. So you asked me about being natural. I think I grew up in the woods. I was a little Italian redneck. I loved being outside. Always had a little plastic gun and aimed at stuff. Always shot a bow and arrow and threw rocks at stuff. And so I think it was always in me as far as that side of things goes. But boy, did they have to develop a lot in me, because it's too much information, especially on the leadership side. Can there be natural born leaders? Sure, to some degree. But it's such a humbling experience to be in those conditions and either lead or be ordered to do things and have the composure to be able to execute under those circumstances. So it is an honor, but some of it's natural and some of it definitely not natural.
Well, it's interesting because when I teach about the breath, so much of it is gaining something, right? Gaining awareness, gaining skill, gaining technical knowledge, gaining the training of the breathing mechanics and so on and so forth, and adapting your physiology and your psychology. But I'm curious because there's also a lot of what you have to let go of. So as you go into this role and live, I'd imagine, under high pressure day in and day out, what was something that maybe you had to let go of, whether it being like a mindset or a habit or something like that you maybe weren't prepared to let go of?
I would say probably, well, just on the breathing side of it, I'd say learning how to breathe. I mean, I played sports, and I remember breathing heavily to get oxygenated blood because I was getting ready to, on the O-line or hit somebody or take tackle or run or sprint. And as a sniper, it's kind of just the opposite. So I had to let go of that mindset of get myself psyched up.
Okay.
So instead of just getting psyched up all the time, there were times that I had to, calm your heart rate down.
Yeah.
I'm
Because it's
psyched
counterintuitive.
It was. And breathing, like you said, a lot of it, at least for the style that I think we do, some of it is counterintuitive, and some of it you kind of have to force and make happen so that you can get the desired results. And again, whether you're a sniper and trying to stay calm so you can keep your upper body, calm and take a good long range shot, as opposed to getting ready to kick in a door with people on the other side trying to kill you.
Yeah.
A little different, and it's funny because we laugh about it, but sometimes you say to each other, just breathe. Like, first, just get some air in you, and then there's techniques to help. So I think I had to give up that get psyched mentality and calm down. I have some former, comrades of mine who taught me, and I sometimes wish they were here with us because they'd laugh and be like, yeah, we had to calm him down. He was somebody we had to be like, okay, relax. So other than that, the family thing, when you have kids, that throws a monkey wrench into the system. Kids are innocent, and I didn't want my kids growing up without someone, but I did believe in, and I think most guys that do it believe in the reason you're doing it, because you probably wouldn't be doing that if you didn't. And then as they got older, I think there was a better understanding and communication with it. So
What about when you go home? So right, you have to get out the door and go from family man to, okay, I'm a SWAT operator commander in these high stress situations. And then you were going through, which we'll dive deeper into the breathing techniques of what you're doing before entry, during entry, after. But I'm curious, how do you go home? How do you go from, okay, I'm in this, and I only imagine what the adrenaline would be like and what the level of grit and control and composure and awareness that you have to have. But then how do you go from that to dinner and, talking about school or whatever else it is?
That's a good one. I'm still working on it.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm still working on it. I do believe, and this is a personal opinion, I believe that if you like doing that kind of work, you're a little different. We used to joke about it and say, I need somebody that's a little off, but that has it in control.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I feel that. I have, something a little different. So coming home to, first of all, a woman and my wife, and I have 2 daughters, if I get mad at something or, they look at me like, oh my God, like, what's wrong with him? And I'm perfectly calm, but I'm like, okay. that's not good. And being in composure, I think, is what makes a good operator. So that was something I also had to give up, was that, from sports, you could get a little fired up.
Oh, yeah.
But being in composure and in control of your emotions, to make better decisions and be calm. Everybody's better when you're calm. Everybody, including yourself. And okay, that's where we get into breathing, right?
I
But
really try to tell people, if you want to control yourself, if you want to master yourself, if you want to master your life, you need to master and control your breath, because through that, you then are able to get a hold of the anatomy that's going on, the physiology that's going on, the psychology that's going on, which is going to influence your behaviors, your reactions, your responses. And I love that. I love to hear that you can see that and you can appreciate that and that you've actually applied it, because I would say my biggest hurdle is, and especially convincing guys like you, because when I say I teach breathing techniques and I want to go to the fire department and talk to the training officer, right, in the SWAT, I want to go to these places and these organizations to say, let me teach your guys breathing techniques, because it's going to make them better. It's going to make them, it's going to keep them alive. It's going to keep their comrades alive, right? But a lot of, and I'll say this, I don't know how else to articulate this, but like macho guys, the man's man, this little girl comes in there and wants to teach them how to breathe. They're like, get out of here. You don't know what I'm going through, which I don't, but I do know how to get you to control your breath, which will get you to control yourself better. So how do you think I could, since you appreciate it and you've lived through it, because that's the other thing, I think getting people to feel their breath is the first and only time that I really get them to believe in it and to convince them of its power. So is there something that maybe for you worked really well, of like, oh, I do need to breathe and I do need to focus on this, and this is going to help me be more in control?
Yeah, I would say, just in my experiences, the higher level you go to, the higher level trained, the higher level individuals, special forces, maybe some SWAT teams, et cetera, I think you're going to find that you're going to be more well accepted.
Okay.
And the reason for that is
they get it.
They get it. Yeah. And they want to perform the best they can. But I do believe that those higher level individuals are always going to be looking to better themselves. I wish we had someone like yourself, honestly, that would have come into the team and talked to us about it, because you had asked about that earlier. Did we get training? Yeah. And I will flat out say there's not enough training. But I will always say that also. Now, there's the rubber meets the road somewhere. Too much training, not enough training. There's no such thing as too much training, in my opinion, especially when you're tasked with the honor of protecting someone, working with other men and their lives are in danger. You're part of a team. You can't train enough. You can't be educated enough. So anything you can do to better yourself because you're serving others, they should be gobbling it up. So I think it would be received. I do. But talk to some guys first. Talk to like the team leaders. Talk to the commanders first. Introduce yourself. If you have some people that have ins, and that would be a good way to go. And it should be taken well. SCBA equipment. That's what firemen are using.
What is it?
Self-contained breathing apparatus, just like scuba divers. But when you're going in a fire, and as a matter of fact, a lot of special forces guys are SCBA trained, because you're going into chemical environments. Well, that's huge, from diving and from, breath control, and you're breathing, oxygen. So that would be very helpful to reduce the amount of oxygen you intake and to reduce the amount of air in your tank that you're going to consume. Fuel for fighting fires, for any of those fields. You want to maximize your performance. So you want to minimize the amount of fuel you're going to consume. And breathing is an excellent way to get your system to be where you need it to be. I'm not just talking about calming it, but if you need it up, you need to be breathing. And sometimes you're breathing through your mouth because you're fighting so hard. You're exercising so much. Your muscles need more oxygen, and therefore you open your mouth and try to get more in. Nose breathing helps to control and temperature and your regulatory breathing. So it's different for everybody and what their mission is, but I think it'd be very well taken. Should be.
And there's a balance between like thinking of someone who's scuba diving or has is in the fire, right? They have to know how to breathe for performance, but they also have to know how to breathe unlimited supply. So I have two questions. First, I'm going to preface this and we'll put it on the backside, but I'm really curious what your relationship is to mortality, to death, right? Because the podcast is called Breathe or Die. And it sounds like, with all these different things, you have to face that, right? But before you answer that, I'm curious about going to the scuba diving because, one, I forgot we had a bet that about how long I can hold my
Yeah,
breath.
that's
I'm not sure
right.
if you remember
That's
that,
right. I
but
do remember it
we have
very
money on
well.
the table. So I'm going to remind you of that here now.
Okay.
He doesn't think I can hold my breath very long or dive very deep, but we're going to show him otherwise. But when you go to scuba dive and you have these hobbies that I know you love, do you think maybe that there is some kind of, do you know what I'm getting at?
Adrenaline junkie kind of thing.
Yeah, like, is there something where now that you've been exposed to this, you're like, man, how do I get my fix? You know, how do I put my life on the line
Right.
and prove to myself that I can still keep it under control?
Yeah. It might be for some. I don't feel that.
Okay.
I enjoy scuba diving, and I'm pretty redundant in my safety measures. Pretty safe diver, so I'm not a tough guy. I don't consider myself a tough guy. I'm not afraid of death.
Has that always been the case?
I think so. I don't want to die, and I have good reason to live, and I will fight to stay alive in any genre. You put me anywhere, I don't want to die. But if death is there and it happens, or it's a consequence of my decisions, I'm okay with it. And I think, like you said, does somebody have it or not have it for the job? I don't know. That's tough to say. Everybody's different. But I did prepare myself long before, and I started pretty young. I was 20, 21 years old when I got on the team. And I did it for a long time. But even before I got in, I kind of had that come to Jesus moment. I said, okay, am I willing to die for another human being? Am I willing to do this and understand the true consequences? And it's not that I was a tough guy and thought, oh yeah, I am. I thought, I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in this. And if dying means I can save that person or my brother on a team, I'd be honored to. Like, wow, who wouldn't? I don't know what you call that, but so yeah, I've had that moment, and I don't think that diving is an adrenaline junkie kind of thing. Hell, my daughter just turned 18 for her 18th birthday. We took her skydiving. And I was like, what am I doing again? Like, I've done it before, and I was like, why am I doing this? Yeah. So I'm not so sure the adrenaline junkie thing is a big part of it. Is it part of it? Maybe. I can't imagine the honor. I keep using that word. Of it's kicking indoors or doing something where other people are willing to do it with you, knowing that the consequences could be dire. You know, and that's, I don't know why, but some of us thrive on it. We enjoy it. I don't think it's the adrenaline thing, just because I didn't really enjoy jumping out of that airplane. It was fun once I jumped and landed. So that's a good question. I think some people it is. I think they need that high because, you know, endorphins and things happen to your system. I'm pretty chilled out now. I like to go fishing and diving and relax a bit.
Well, for me, because I free dive and I rock climb and I do these endeavors that there's high risk involved, but I get off on it because I have to calm myself down in these high risks. So it's not
the control for you?
Exactly. It's not the adrenaline that gets me off. It is, hey, look, I can perform under pressure. And again, not at the level that I could only imagine that you're doing
It's
or
the
we're doing,
same.
you know, but for free diving and that and rock climbing, there, like you said, you have to be redundant. You have to have all the checks. You have to make sure that you're taking educated risks and not reckless risks. And I think that that's something people misconstrue or they don't appreciate entirely, you know, no matter what it is that you're putting your life on the line, there's a reason you're doing it for. So
are you still doing it, do you think, because of that? Because you know you can do it.
yeah,
I've seen you. You're pretty zen. You can calm yourself, and so now you know you can control yourself. So why are you still chasing it?
Because it's like an athlete, right? Because if I don't continue to train, I will lose that capability and capacity. Also, before I started really falling in love with the breath and becoming a master of it, or you know, in search of becoming a master of the breath, I used it as a way to not have to emotionally regulate, right? Because if your life is on the line, if I don't do the right thing and the consequence is death, I can't think about, am I, you know, heartbroken, or is this going on, or what somebody said the wrong. I don't think of any of that, right? I'm thinking of perform, keep it together, forget about all the fluff. And that I liked as maybe a way to it's weird because you hear people say self-medicate, but it's like self-psychology or self-therapy.
It's
Like,
health,
yeah, like
mental and physical
freediving,
health.
running, rock climbing, these things were my therapy. But now I believe I'm a little bit more emotionally aware of what was really going on. So I would say the thing that keeps me doing it, one is definitely the physical performance, but it is a mental training. It is a type of training that I want to be able to sustain. And I'm type A. I want to just keep getting better.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
how much farther can I push my
Can you push it?
performance?
Yeah, it's funny. It's I got. She's right. My wife, she had told me that I get angry now, and let myself get what I call out of control.
A
'Cause
little
anger is
loose.
and it's not good. It's not healthy for so many different reasons. So good, you stay in control. You should always be in control. It's good for you for so many different, and good for everybody else around you too.
Yes.
And I think when I was working out more than I am now, and operating at those levels, and she said it, you were so like, you never got.
Oh.
And I'm feeling it. I'm like, ooh, it's interesting because now I've been at it for quite a while. I don't feel like I have that same, and I need to go back to what you're saying. I need to go back to my regiment. I need to push myself and be humbled and be calmer. And when I was doing it, boy, I was, and I felt confident and I felt calm, and it was just what you did. And
It's a different layer of being in shape.
yeah,
It's people think of physical fitness.
different place and time in life too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the level of appreciation for the mental, I think a lot of times they call it mental toughness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking of like more of like mentally fit,
Mental health,
psychologically
yeah.
sound. And I just wish people could appreciate the breath component of it more. I wish that so kind of going back to you being in the field, and how does the breath or your breath and your awareness on your breath change from, okay, I'm about to make entry, I'm preparing to make entry. And then how does the breath change when you actually are in the chaos? And then what's the recovery look like?
So we'll start with the different genres, right? So breathing in, breathing up, and techniques to calm yourself for long range, operations. A sniper, maybe what they might do, as opposed to an entry person whose boots are on the ground and you're kicking indoors, things like that. And I would say it's so funny because you hit a nail on the head, an important point I'd really like to reiterate because you said it. You said that people don't really kind of get the breathing. Like you talk about it, but they don't get it until you make them start doing it. And I think that's extremely important. Probably the most and foremost with breathing is that it's everything you do. I do believe that breathing will make it better. Just about everything you do. And I don't mean just breathing because we're breathing. I mean educated breathing, right?
This is total tangent, but I feel like it applies. I taught a breath workshop on Sunday, and I had a girl who came because she couldn't orgasm. And she was like, I don't know how to. And I was like, girl, you're not breathing.
I never thought about
the
this
breathing.
One, so thank you for that. This is
and I know it's total tangent, but I really do feel like it's related in the sense that when people say they can't perform or they can't experience or gain certain control or even opening of certain experiences, it was you could see she was embarrassed sharing it, but that's literally why she came to my breath class. She's like, I feel like this is why I can't experience this. So sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
It's an interesting area, and I think it's paralleling, the excitement of maybe a special operations unit, because breathing is in everything we do. Thinking, physicality, overall health. No matter what you think about doing, like orgasming, when you're breathing properly, it's going to enhance your experience. It's going to make you better at what it is you're trying to do. You're going to perform better. So breathing up and breathing during operations. I will be honest and say that I can't tell you how many operations doors I've been through, and I don't remember some moments of how I was breathing.
Yeah.
Could I have been better had I actually controlled my breathing better during that critical moment? Probably. But what I will say is I do remember breathing prior to, oxygenating my blood, telling myself, doing we call it a box breathing. And there's lots of different, again, I'm not going to say that some of the stuff we learned was the best or the only thing. I've seen the box breathing go from 4 seconds, 6 seconds. There's seconds differences in the techniques.
Oh, yeah.
Ours was, again, keep it simple, stupid. It was 4, 4, 4, 4. And we'll talk about that. Breathing before and then breathing afterwards. During, like, sorry, but door kickers, during those really excited moments, I would tell people and just breathe,
Yeah.
get
Just
air in
keep
your
it
lungs,
going.
just keep it going, right? There's a lot happening sometimes, but breathing, the calmer you could control your breath while you're doing it, guess what? You were able to perform better, more efficiently. And that's always the goal with these kinds of tactics, is to be the best you can be for the people you're serving, for the mission, and for your teammates. So I would say beforehand, box breathing. That's the 4, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, and then 4 at your pause. And then do that for a couple cycles if you can. If you can. Like some military guys, they're in the middle of driving a Humvee and they're already calm, and then all of a sudden something happens. Well, guess what? You're not going to sit there. You don't have the time. They're not going to sit there and do a box breath. Maybe when they have a moment, maybe they've got cover and they're in the middle of chaos before they exfil or get out of that area of cover. If they have that moment to try to control their breathing, they're going to perform better.
I try to let people know that every breathing technique has a specific time and place that it's best suited for, right?
Well said.
So your guys who are, or you yourself who are box breathing, and in pranayama we call it asama vritti, and there's so much—
Say that again?
Asama vritti, and there's so much more to it, right? Because it's not just the duration of the inhalation, the retention, the exhalation, the suspension. It's also what's the volume of air. What is the pressure? What's the speed? What's the, the breathing mechanics that you're using? There's so much more refinement and advancement that can go into it. But let's say that you're keeping it simple, stupid, right? And you're doing your body and something happens and you totally forget. You're still breathing, right? So the more you have trained consciously, that subconscious moment of you not thinking about your breath, your training is going to kick in. What do they say a lot of the times in you resort to the level of your
lowest level of training?
Yeah. So if somebody was never experiencing breathing techniques, they're just going to breathe or hold their breath, and whatever that sympathetic fight, flight, freeze response is going to happen for them. But if they had trained and really practiced these breathing techniques and been educated on, okay, I can't do the four box breath, but I can focus on getting more air in, and I can blow a little slower out, or whatever it is that would work for that situation that they're in. And that's really my job and my mission, is to educate people. I'm like, hey, listen, there are so many breathing techniques that you can learn and that you can apply in all of these situations. And I would say the thing that bothers me, frustrates me a little bit, is that there's a lot of breath educators and facilitators out there who are pushing one type of breath for all types of situations. I'm like, one, that's not going to happen. And even if all your guys are in the same situation, because their breathing mechanics are different, their CO2 tolerance is different, their sympathetic response is different, maybe they're more of a freezer than a fighter or a flyer, they are going to need a different breathing technique for that same situation. So I love that you're able to acknowledge that. But I also think that, like, if people were training more and if they appreciated it more, they would be like, whoa, I don't even have to think about my breath. I'm going to resort to that subconscious training and I'm going to get through it even better. I'll be more prepared, more capable.
That, like, outstanding. Like what you just said is outstanding. And that's why I'm happy to be here, like, seriously, because I do believe this, and I'm not just shining your shoes. I really do believe this. You give a damn about it and you get it. And that's what people, like you said, would be accepted. That's what they're going to get. Yeah. Like, you want to do the best for the best reasons, and that's all really matters. And I think when it comes to breathing, there is nowhere near the level of expertise that you have being taught to these guys. Now, I'm speaking from my experience, and I can tell you probably right now, currently, they're not getting that level of understanding. It is no different than any other technical skill, including operations, tactical operations, hostage rescue, bus assaults, airplane assaults, whatever you want to call it. The more you train it, the better you become at it. Everybody hears about Murphy. Murphy's Law happens. I've never seen a perfect operation. I've never seen one. Never. Something always throws a wrench into it. But if your level of training, if you bleed and sweat in training, if you're here doing the very absolute most and best you can do, and then things fall short or something happens, guess what? You're still getting up. Yeah. And breathing, I think, is just like you said. I think if you can train it to maximize and do the best for your circumstances and your situation and your tactics or whatever it is, if you're like, oh shit, falling short or something happens, you're still going to be successful, and more so than if you didn't have that education. So I think you're spot on with all of that.
So that actually makes me think of, I'm sure you've experienced losses. I'm sure that you've experienced, I don't know what you would call it, like
A fail,
yeah, like situations where
something to
you're
learn from.
like, oh, that was not how that was meant to go. So when we go through different emotional breathing techniques, a lot of people come to me for grief. A lot of people come to me for regret. They come to me for these emotional blocks where they just can't get over like some shit that went down, How do you, in your experience, was that something that was really hard for you, or was that something where you're like, okay, I'm competent and capable, I know I did the best that I could and I can take pride in that, and I'll learn from wherever I did not do maybe your best?
Yeah.
Or do you find that that was maybe a little heavy of a baggage or weight to carry around?
Yeah, in leadership roles, it was tough for me.
Okay.
I didn't want to fail, period, ever. I'm a winner. I'm going to do everything I can to be a winner. It sucks to be a loser, period. I don't care what anybody says. It's not fun, especially when you're dealing with this stuff. But when you're in a position to fail others, that's hard for me personally. So when we had hiccups, when we had a failure, you have two choices. You can sit there and get stuck on that failure and stay in that hole, or you can learn from it and say, okay, every single training and operation we did, we had an imperfection. And, from shooting, I like to tell people that when I teach shooting, I tell them, listen, I've never seen a perfect shooter. We are going to have imperfections, all of us. A perfect shooter means you can shoot in split seconds and hit the same hole every single time, no matter what. Show me one. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
So when we have an imperfection happen in our life, a failure, a loss, whatever you want to call it, you learn from it. You look at it and say, that is the best thing I can do, is learn from that hiccup, that mistake, that failure, that loss. Because if you don't, it stays a loss. Make it a win. I think it's Jaco. I don't know if I get in trouble for saying those things, but on a podcast, he was just saying it's a great thing. When guys would come to him, and he was in a leadership role, something to the effect, I don't want to bastardize it too much, but something to the effect that if it was a problem, we need more money, or this happened, or that happened, he would look at him and go, good. And he tried them, and it's such a hard thing to do for me. And you have to look at it and say, good, because out of that is going to come, we need to increase our budget. Yeah. Out of that is going to come, that was a failure in operation or a skill set that we need to work on harder. Yeah. And it's a great mentality to have. So yeah, having hiccups, breathing is in every aspect, before an operation, during an operation, right? Physically speaking, after the operation, and then literally mental health. When I think about something or something bothers me, if I just control and take the breaths in, it is amazing how much better I can handle it, physically or mentally. So it comes in all stages of, I think, your operations.
Well, for me, it's preparation, right? It is, life is going to happen. And I don't know what's going to happen, but what can I control and how can I be best prepared? So that's actually how we know each other. Is I was looking for someone to teach me how to shoot. And I wanted to know, okay, hopefully I never have to use a firearm ever. And I know it's very controversial, and I appreciate that very much. And I've had many different feelings on firearms and self-defense and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I want to be as competent and as capable as I possibly can, and I want to be as prepared as I possibly can. And learning how to shoot my firearm was something that really was important, because we're in Florida, and now we are constitutional carry, which means that when I first started to learn how to shoot, how to go through and get my concealed weapons permit and all of that. And I remember being so appalled at the course, because I thought I was going to learn how to shoot and how to conceal and how to draw and I thought I was going to learn a lot, and I couldn't believe what little I learned. And then I looked around.
I'm glad that wasn't my course.
Oh my gosh, no, it was not your course. Let me make sure that we were saying that it was not Mark's course, but it was before I found you.
Yes.
Which is why I sought you out. I sought for the best. And I really said to the people I was asking, one, I can't believe that they're letting people walk around firearms with no education. And two, the people who were in there, you could see a lot of them just be like, cool. Like they didn't want to take that responsibility to learn, where I knew I wanted to be as prepared and equipped as possible. But so I ended up asking around, and I was like, I don't just want somebody who knows how to shoot. I want somebody who lives and breathes shooting and has made a lot of mistakes, right? Because that was probably my biggest thing as a learner, is I want the person who's done everything wrong or seen others do it wrong, so I can learn as many things as possible. And you came so highly recommended. And I remember being thoroughly impressed with our first session. You have some, I don't know, what would I call Nolan? Is he like your apprentice? Is he?
Yeah, he's one of our instructors. Yeah, he's a friend. He's an apprentice. He's an instructor. Yeah.
But young kid who has like kind of grew up learning from you. And I just think that it's really great what you're doing, because you're educating people in a way that I was super impressed with the training that we've done together. But also, I didn't grow up with, a dad who was like teaching me these things, because I think that that's the other thing around firearms, is you either are comfortable around them and you're educated, or you're, familiar with them to a degree, or you are terrified of them and you know that they can cause and do have caused a lot of damage in different situations. And I think that the more we learn to be prepared, whether it's with our breath or with owning, being a responsible gun owner, that you are doing whatever it is, whether it's driving your car or whatnot, like you're preparing. How can I be the best that I possibly can? So
yeah, we'd all be a lot safer and a lot better off if everybody had that mentality that you have. Like literally, I believe that there may be a chance where I might need a tool to help me equalize a threat to my life or my family, to defend myself, whether it's from animals or people. It doesn't matter to me. So if there's a possibility, it's life or death, then I'm going to be educated. I really want to be as good as I can be and hopefully never need it. You have the choice ultimately, so you still have that choice if I carry or don't carry, and whether or not I use it or not.
Yes.
So a lot of people have this mentality because of their education. You mentioned it. If you're not exposed to certain things, you have a view of that situation, that issue. And if you're not exposed to self-defense or firearms, or have never been a victim, or all you've got is from TV or the media, it could be a very skewed understanding of that realm. And I would rather have something and never need it, because statistically speaking, depending on where you live and what you do and who you are, statistically hopefully never need it, than to be in a circumstance where my life or the life of a countryman or a loved one is at risk and I don't have the means. That would be hard for me.
Well, that's the other thing, because I also, at the same time that I was trying to learn how to shoot, right, effectively, and draw effectively and move while shooting and all of those,
But you do pretty damn good, by the way.
Trying, I'm a little out of practice. I'll get some on Saturday. But I was also learning jujitsu and Muay Thai, and I was asking for people with knife self-defense, just things that I really, again, like, I never want to use this, but I don't want to be that person that goes to this most lethal option.
All your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, no, because I never, ever want to have to use it. So what else? What other tools? What other techniques? Because again, like, I have to liken it back to breathing techniques. People think, they learn one way to breathe, that's going to be the thing that they can depend on all the time. And I think that there are definitely situations where you might need to defend yourself, but that's not going to be justified, and you can't actually use that big bad tool, and now you have to figure out how to use something else.
So you're talking about decision making, right?
Yes.
So decision making, going back to breathing, better than any tool, better than any weapon, better than any jujitsu or martial arts is your decision making.
Yes.
They call it run fu, or run. Can you get away?
Yes.
Avoid the problem. Well, what do you need to be able to do those things? You need to be able to be calm enough to understand that you have options. Then you have to be calm enough, breathing, to be able to say, okay, I can walk away, I can back away from this, or I need to run, or I need to draw a gun, or I need to fight. And then again, it goes back to breathing. It comes back to, do I have the mental capacity to make a good decision under these stress, and now can I execute? If I'm going to run, I I want to oxygenate my blood. My muscles are going to eat that, and they need that. How do you do that? And if you have what you have, you're going to be better at performing whatever skill that is you decide to execute at that time. Because one, you're going to pick a better skill because you're breathing and thinking. And two, you're going to execute better because of the physicality of, having breath and oxygen and all the details that go into good, solid breathing.
There's a lot of balance, because I remember the first time I shot with you, there was that, I can't remember how you articulated it, but you're like, you have an explosion in your hand, right? And I can't remember what you called it.
Trigger control, with jerking the trigger.
Yeah, what is it when you're overdoing it?
Yeah.
When you're anticipating
Anticipating. You're anticipating the gun going off,
So,
which is very normal.
Yes, but I think that that's the thing, is being able to understand what is going to happen with something like that, and know, like, okay, this is this very dangerous thing that I'm holding in my hand, and I now have to not force it to do the thing, but allow it to do what it's going to do, and allow me to.
Got a good memory.
Remember,
Outstanding.
Allow me to do. And I think that that's something that a lot of people just they don't go that deep. I don't know if I want to call it deep, but they don't go that deep, right? They're just thinking, I just have to get the thing done. And that's also when people talk about a destination, like, I'm just trying to perform and get this thing done and get here, versus how am I doing it? How well am I doing it? Which helps your aim and your accuracy. And, I remember when I first started, I had a blister on my finger from the trigger because I was just, gripping too hard and not having it in the right place, not holding the gun correctly.
What happens with all that excitement if you hold your breath during all of that?
Well, to me, it's fear. Yeah.
What happens if during that fear you're holding your breath? What happens to your muscles?
Yeah.
What happens to your decision making? Right?
Everything
You can
degrades.
exactly. You know it better than I do. You can shake from tremors. And I've seen that. I've seen people literally shooting, whether it's a long gun or a pistol, and they're so intense because they have some apprehension and fear. I don't always call it fear. It's just apprehension sometimes. And sometimes it's a truly well-founded fear. Maybe they have a reason to be afraid of the gun. And I've got some stories about that. But, pointing the gun, and they're sitting there holding their breath, and I'll just sit next to them and I'll video them. And then I'll lean over in their ear and I'll go, breathe. And they'll go, they're literally not breathing, right? Yep. So, it's so important. It does, and it sounds corny, but it literally all comes back to proper breathing techniques. If you're not breathing, you're gonna absolutely deteriorate your skill set, your health, your overall performance, no doubt about it.
One of the things that I can liken it to is I grew up surfing. And in the same way that I see people, and I think I tried to, maybe at first when I was learning, control the gun or control the surfboard. It's like, you can't, because there's this big wave under it that's going to move it in the way that it wants to, and it's going to take you with it, right? In the same way that there's that, I don't know what you call it, but that reaction that brings you down when you fire, right? The momentum and the force. And when you learn how to feel and be calm and respond rather than react, you become so much more in control, and you become so much more fluid and capable and beautiful and skilled,
that's a good word. Fluid, that's a great one. When you look at, we're talking about, operations and tactics and things, you look at a good team that's operating. They're doing, maybe a hostage rescue situation where they're having to go in and take accurate fire under the stress of somebody else trying to kill them and not shoot innocent lives and take innocent lives. If you look at good teams, people that are doing that well, the majority of the time, they do look like they're in slow motion. They look fluid. And that fluidity comes from them being in control. And I can guarantee you talk to anybody, I think, that does that. And you look at good teams, these really good operators, they're in control. And they're in control, a large part of it is because they are breathing properly. They're calming their entire system, and they're giving their system exactly what it needs for that operation. On TV, I see guys hut and jumping out of, trucks, and they're all tight. And as a boxer will tell you, you don't get into the ring. And if you see somebody tightening up like this, I'm like, oh, they're in trouble. Yeah. You don't do that. It's Muhammad Ali, as far back as float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. You're more fluid. You can execute better. You're more precise in your movements. When you are oxygenating your blood and your mind and calming it, you can think better. So it's absolutely paramount for you to be able to breathe in the right way for the right operation at the right time.
And that's How you just said that is what I would like to reiterate, because I think a lot of times people use the term properly. Like, are you breathing properly? And people think that properly is one way. It's like when you're in school, you get an A or you don't get an A, right? There's one way to get an A. And breathing properly doesn't mean you're just breathing this precise way all the time for everything. It means that you know what situation you're in, what's required of you in that situation, and what's the proper or what's the appropriate technique and skill to breathe for that particular aim.
Exactly. And what's really great is I can guarantee you, if we went through this and I told you how we're doing it, you could better me.
Yeah.
That's your field, you know. I wasn't a breathing expert, a breathing technique expert. You know, neither were the people that were really, you know, working with us on breathing. They're good at it, and like you said, it's better to get this than. But I guarantee you could better the field. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. There's so many areas that we could use, you know, more important, better training in, and that's definitely one of them.
So my favorite thing, especially in the phase that I'm in right now, is research. I want to understand, what is it that you would have really needed or what you really would have appreciated as far as having someone come in and talk to you about your breath and breathing techniques. What's one thing that you could speak to where you were like, man, if we would have had a breathing technique for this exact situation where I see most guys hold their breath, or I see most guys shake, or I see most guys whatever it is, what would that be?
Okay, so, gosh, I feel so like awkward speaking sometimes about I've worked with people better than me. Like I've learned from people better than me, and I'm a sponge. I always believe that there's so much more to learn. There's people better at me at everything you do. So to say this is a little weird for me. It's hard, but what I would say is that when anyone is involved in a critical moment, you've seen the videos of the law enforcement officers, and their voice gets really high pitched.
Oh my gosh.
And they're
yes.
screaming, and they're like, and their breathing is out of control. It hurts me. It literally hurts me. I just want to grab them and be like, ooh, start breathing. You know, it's hard. So the biggest area I would say is that in the moment when these heroes, these people are faced with that life or death, that risk, somebody shooting at them or trying to take another person's life, and they're worried about liability, and they're worried about not shooting innocent people, and they're worried about dying themselves, is how to control those emotions so that you can mentally get through it, the aftermath, but physically perform better, not scream on that radio, get the message across, perform better in that moment. And that's probably the biggest area that I have seen where we could use improvement is the average law enforcement officer. Their training is, how often do they get involved in that? An officer may never, ever fire his firearm in his entire career. But there's times where he's pulling his gun, or, you know, and it goes from 0 to 100 like that.
So do they do any type of training
Not enough.
But do they put you in that situation where they're like, okay, this is where the shit hit the fan?
They do.
Let's see how you react?
They do, and they're getting better at what we call, you know, scenario-based training. But, I could get in trouble for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's nothing like getting into a fight. You need to get your nose punched a few times. So, you know, if you're talking about, and this is an opinion, you're talking about operations. Look, there's some SWAT teams don't get to execute search warrants, right? And they only get called out for really serious things. That's terrible. Because the only time those men get to operate under those conditions with live bodies moving around and their teammates is when they have a really bad critical incident. That's not healthy for that team. That team needs to operate under those conditions as much as you can put them in them. And the better they will be, because they're going to make mistakes and they will learn from their mistakes.
So what I would love to do is I do surf survival training and stuff like that, because if you ever watch like the Navy SEALs go through their training, I think one of the things is when you're fighting your primary sign of life, right? People think, you know, what am I eating? How am I sleeping? How am I exercising? How am I training? How am I doing all these different things to optimize? But if you can't breathe, and every cell in your body needs oxygen to survive, and I throw you into a situation where now you cannot breathe. So the brain does the thing in the same way where you're at that highest critical moment where everything else shuts down. And it's like, what's the most important? Well, in that moment when you can't breathe, the only thing that matters is how do I breathe? Or how do I get myself out of the water or cool enough to get out of the change or whatever it is that you're doing out of the riptide so that you now are able to find breath and you're able to hold your breath and your composure long enough so that you can find breath. So I would love to work with, some guys like that and say, hey, listen, if you are not getting enough training, I can not simulate you getting punched in the face or, something like that getting shot at, but I can simulate the same, well, right. I can simulate the same way that your body and your brain's going to react when you're at those highest critical moments and see how you respond and teach you how to respond more effectively and efficiently.
Even more specific, snipers.
Yeah.
Sniper training, they could use it a lot.
Yeah.
That's a different genre. We've been talking more about, door kicking and,
Yep.
Operations on boots on the ground kind of thing. Snipers have different missions as well within their own, tactics and skill sets. So they may be places for days and days, doing Overwatch or, in an urban hide somewhere in a car. And the conditions are very challenging for those guys. So physically speaking, really, really maximizing their fuel is important. So, breathing will help with maximizing your economy.
We call it oxygen efficiency.
Exactly. There you go. Oxygen efficiency. That's huge for those guys. And then obviously taking difficult shots, long range shots. How to breathe. We haven't even talked about that, but the details of diaphragm breathing and breathing in from your, and I'm talking rudimentary, you're probably giggling at me, but pushing your belly towards your belt and not moving your upper chest is extremely important when you're laid down in a prone position or shooting a long range shot. Your weapons platform needs to be fairly steady when you break that shot.
Yep.
How do you do that?
So I actually do breath assessments for all my clients where we go over all of your breathing mechanics and we do full measurements to see where are your weak points, where are your strong points, neuromuscularly speaking, where are you disconnected or not fully connected, and how can we train you so that you are able to activate the best breathing mechanics and the best activation or engagement or disengagement of the breathing muscles so that you can breathe that technique in the best way possible.
I did not realize you went into that detail.
Oh, yeah, we do not just that, but then we go into the physiology. So going through your oxygen saturation, your CO2 tolerance, going into the grit. So when I have people hold their breath, I'm not only measuring, okay, physiologically speaking, how well are you able to hold your breath of your CO2 tolerance and your oxygen efficiency, but also are you the type of person who has a lot of grit? So some people have a physiological, really great CO2 tolerance, meaning they can hold their breath comfortably for a while, but they have shit grit. So they're like, oh, this sucks. I'm done. I don't want to hold it anymore. Just they get a little bit of the muck, a little bit of the pain, a little bit of the effort, and they give up. And then I also have guys who, happens a lot with like big CEOs, where physiologically speaking, their CO2 tolerance is crap. Like it's just horrible. You can see that their body is wanting to breathe very quickly after holding the breath, but their psychological grit is amazing that these guys will hold their breath way longer and they're so uncomfortable, but they're able to keep their brain allow their brain to keep their body under control so that they can get through that. So we're
naturally just right off the bat without training, you're saying that's a trend?
Some of them do, yeah.
Right.
And that's the thing that I'm measuring. So I'm not just measuring what are your breathing mechanics, what's the anatomy of your breath, like what's the physiology, the blood chemistry, and your oxygen efficiency, but also psychologically speaking, how well are you at fighting that primary sign of life?
Yep.
How well are you able to psychologically adapt to breathing techniques, breath holding, everything that goes with it?
We need to set something up. I think there's some people that really could use that help. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. And that's the point of all of this, know. And I think
absolutely
the reason this podcast is called Breathe or Die, I've gotten some raised eyebrows, right? Like, Danny, your breath guidance, you're teaching all these beautiful breathing techniques. Like, why call your book and your podcast Breathe or Die? And I said, well, because breath is your primary sign of life. And if you don't have a relationship with your breath, you won't understand your relationship with life. And if you don't have a relationship with life, you won't have a relationship with death, and everybody's going to die. And the thing that kills you is that you stop breathing. You know, I mean, of course, other things, but that's the thing you're going to experience in that last moment. So I think that no matter what we're talking about or about breath or breathing techniques, that somehow it always ties back to life, and life will always tie back to that primary fear of our own mortality for most of us, right? I think we can train that as well. But
I have
yeah,
2 daughters.
yeah.
I completely understand like how breathing applies to physicality and tactics and so forth, sports, and then surviving
Yeah. So you take
real life
you
with
take the
family. And
skills from SWAT that you're taking home, right? Can you like maybe speak just a little bit on that?
oh yeah, anytime I hear the word boyfriend, just say it, and I have to go.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's psychologically speaking, I'm very different thinker. Men and women, how I'm still learning how to handle that, especially with young ladies. It's very challenging. It's probably the most challenging thing I think I've done in my life.
So you use your breath a lot
Oh my
when.
gosh, I would be dead if I didn't,
So
or they'd kill me. One of the two.
is this something that you share with them? Is this something in your family you talk about? Like, because I know some of the people that we're most close to, right? We don't always have those open lines of communication of how we can show up better. So is that something that you've taught your daughters? Have you said, "Hey girls, take a breath, take a second, I'm heated, you're heated," or, kick the boyfriend out, something like
Yeah.
that?
No, I'm guilty of that. What you just mentioned about having people close to you and not talking enough about those things. Probably I was more of a Neanderthal mentality for many years. I'm trying now. Hopefully, it's not too late to be a little more reserved and share things like that. We have talked about breathing and combat breathing when we shoot together because
Okay.
they're great shots. They love to
I
shoot.
remember one of your daughters hog shooting when
Yeah.
we were out there, and she's
Yes.
in camo gear and she's got a big rifle on her back. I'm like, is she 16 years old? Like, what is going
Yeah,
on right now?
they handle themselves very well
I was
around
super
firearms.
impressed.
Yeah, I'm really glad too. And it's really their own accord. I didn't force it on them. I wanted to in the beginning because I wanted them to have that skill, but I didn't, and they took it upon themselves, and they really do enjoy it. The younger one enjoys fast competition style shooting, although they seem to enjoy both. And the one you were talking about, she really enjoys long range shooting and putting bullets in a very specific area. But they do good at both, so it's really interesting. The breathing, I don't talk to them enough about it.
Okay.
I really don't, because I do think it would help. The wife's very intelligent. Even though she married me, she's very intelligent. So she does a lot of research. She likes to research, and she's physically fit. So she does a lot of breathing techniques and talks about it and tries to, share it with us a lot. And I think I failed a little bit in that area. I think I could be a lot better at explaining why it's important, because it's not just about physical, performance. It's about your overall health, mental, physical, exactly what we're talking about. Yep. So yeah, I think I'm a case of that family thing, not sharing enough with it.
Well, I'm appreciative that for everything you've done in the sense of how you put I really do. I think that needs to be acknowledged, that you had chosen to go into a line of work where you say, I'm going to put other people's life and liberty in front of my own. So thank you for everything that you have done. And also, I want to make sure that people know where they can find you, because you are an amazing instructor. You have a team of amazing instructors underneath of you. So do you want to tell people how they can find you?
Sure. We're my company that I opened. Actually, I opened it a few years before I retired. Is called Advanced Defensive Concepts, and we do firearms training. We used to do some self-defense training, hand-to-hand stuff, but I stopped doing that. Yep. We're primarily firearms, and we do everything from beginner level, concealed weapons permits, to coming to your home and explaining angles. Again, keep it simple, but how to fight from your home, how to defend your home. What if somebody came in, and what could you do? And it's a challenging realm because there's so many variables there. And there's a lot of opinions, right, and tactics based on movement and what's the best place to do and how do you. So that's an interesting one. A lot of people enjoy that. But yeah, advanced defensive concepts, and we love to work with people, and we give it back. I don't do a lot of big stuff, big classes. I like to keep it personal. I think I can touch you a little bit more, make a bigger difference when I keep my my interactions, close. So
I do the same thing
yeah,
with my breath teacher certifications. I have my online training where like everybody can go and learn over 60 different breathing techniques. It's all online. They get
good.
lifetime access. But then the people who actually want to dive deeper and teach these things, I'm 10 or less. Like I don't want more than that because I want everybody to really have that level of
It's about my number
education.
too.
And that's something that I really appreciate about you and your style, because I think so often, no matter what we're teaching as educators,
Hmm.
that we're always told we need to scale and we need to get it out and we need to make,
Yeah, you could do more classes. You could do
yeah.
that. I'm like,
But the
I could, but
quality
that's
will always
exactly.
diminish with the quantity. And I don't want to say always, because I'm sure there are special
Hmm.
ways to, but I do think that the more quantity of something you put out, sometimes you do have to give a little way of that quality. So I want to say that I appreciate the fact that your concealed weapons permit class is nothing like the one that I
Nothing.
took.
Very different than most.
Yeah.
Very different than most. Yeah, it's really interesting how they tie in everything you've said, and I didn't realize it. I'm even actually learning right now and realizing more with you how much and why you did what you did with firearms, and I really get it, and it explains to why you did perform the way you do too. So, hats off to you for having an open mind and seeking out the education out there in all the different fields.
And that is one of my biggest things, is where are breathing techniques either underapplied or underappreciated or overlooked?
Everywhere,
But also,
everywhere.
where's the niche,
Yeah.
right? And I love, like, when I call you, I'm like, I need to know everything there is about shooting while breathing and, in your close, what do you call it? Close combat
Close
quarters?
quarters, yeah, close
Close
quarters
quarter
combat.
combat and breathing like that. And what if it's not with a firearm, or if it's this type of
Yeah.
firearm, or if somebody's shooting back, or it's just at the range and it's the profession. Like, there's
Mm.
so many, like, competition shooting versus combat
Very
shooting,
different. Yep.
that everything's different. And I believe that people, once they learn how to appreciate that, no matter what they're doing, no
Mm.
matter what they're training, no matter what level of refinement and up leveling they're trying to get to, if you incorporate breathing techniques into it, you're going to find some extra magic.
Yeah, I think that's what's neat for you. I mean, you literally could apply it to wherever you want to delve into, because whether it's CEOs and people trying, making good decisions at high level, or health for them, or tactical operators, it almost doesn't. Athletes, pick it.
Yep.
Like you said, it applies to every facet of your life to enhance it and make it better. There's no question about it. Snipers, we were talking about that before, and one of the things they try to do is try to get at least 3 cycles of controlled breath in before you break a shot, of course, if you can,
Yes.
when you can. So what you're doing is you're trying to get a 3 to 5 second hold, all right, at your natural respiratory pause, so that everything is stable, so you can break that shot with a stable platform. And, sometimes they don't have that chance. You don't have the opportunity to sit there and do 3 cycles of good box breathing or something similar to get everything settled down. You can see your heartbeat in the crosshairs many times if you're putting too much body English on the gun, or if you're in a position, or you just ran to someplace and your heart's going as fast as it can.
Yeah.
Even if they're in a very critical moment and they only got to a position where they can lean against a wall and their heart's racing because they just ran to that position, even if it's 3 breaths that they were able to do to control it that much more, you're that much better off. And that's applied to everything. You're that much better off if you can get to do it.
Because a lot of people think of preparation or performance. I think a lot of times the recovery breathing is overlooked. They don't put as much emphasis on the recovery, because in your situation or in their situation, you might have to be not only preparing to breathe, performing for while you breathe, but that recovery is not just, okay, we're done. You might now have to go back into preparing and performing over and over and over again in different cycles. So the recovery breathing is really important.
Absolutely. I remember we had a hostage scenario, and I was in I was in a car, and I was the first sniper to get there, and fortunate enough to have a good position where we positioned amongst cars in a parking lot. It was like a shopping mall kind of thing, and they were inside. And sometimes when you get to these scenarios, depending on where the intel comes from on the civilian side, well, I guess both sides really, military or civilian side, I would assume it'd be the same. You don't know where that information comes from all the time and how valid it is.
Yeah.
So you get to certain scenarios and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be, or this is, or this isn't. Well, I remember thinking, this seems, odd that they would still be, here in this certain situation. And then I had movement inside, and it was a young lady on all fours crawling and hiding. And I remember feeling my heart, my heart rate instantly go, oh, this is it. This is a good one. And what did I do? I went right to breathing technique. I said, and try to get in that zone, try to calm my mind, try to get, so I went right into that breathing. And it happened, like you said, second nature. We call it sometimes muscle memory with certain skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you can make it become part of your life and second nature, you'll start doing it without necessarily even consciously thinking about it. Sometimes it'll become subconscious.
And that's what I call it. I call it subconscious training, because your breath is autonomic, meaning you're breathing and you don't have to think about it. Subconsciously, your autonomic system is breathing for you at all times, but it's the one thing that you actually can make your subconscious conscious. I actually just made a video about breaking bad habits, breathing techniques to break bad habits,
Ooh, I
or
got a lot of those.
addiction or smoking or whatever it is, right? Because it becomes this pattern subconsciously that you just kind of go into, and being able to make your subconscious conscious, then you're able to use your breath as a channel for change. So that's something that I want to say thank you, like sincerely, for coming on, for talking to me, for being able to share your skills, both in what you do and your niche and your wheelhouse, but also being able to show people and really live and breathe that example, that breathing techniques are going to help you in these fields of experience and expertise that a lot of people maybe don't even think about.
It's huge. And I say that right back to you. I appreciate you having us, and somebody out there looking out for everybody else too. It's important. It's important. I'd love to get you involved with some people. We'll try to.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening in. This is Breathe or Die. I'm Danny May. This is Marc Pezzella, and I hope to breathe with you all again soon. Stay tuned. Bye.